Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm Annie, and today with us we have Alex Kirkpatrick, who is a communication instructor at the Washington State University.
Okay, I am here this time.
Hi, how
Hey,
are
how you doing?
you? Oh, good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. How is it over in Illinois?
Yeah, it's good. I just yeah, it's pretty good. Thank you so much for
Nice.
being here.
Yeah, no worries. Good to meet you.
Yeah. So, I'm Annie. I'm a rising junior in high school. Um, in Illinois. And then I started this project because I've noticed a lot of like misinformation, especially like during COVID and like on social media and stuff. Um, so could you please like introduce yourself and like what do you do kind of?
Yeah, well, my name's Alex Kirkpatrick, and I'm a lecturer at the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at Washington State University. I teach courses mainly on science communication and also strategic communication more generally. You know, how and why are people influenced by the media? But with me in particular, I'm interested in how and why people become persuaded to believe science and anti-science through the media. Because most of us, once we leave formal education, most people don't go back to science in a formal sense. Most become reliant on science and its popularized forms, right? Like science fiction or,
Mhm.
just some books about science that aren't full of mathematics and things like that. So I'm interested in how those work on people and where people go to find out the so-called facts that they want to believe in. And
Mhm.
yeah, I've been doing that for a few years now. I've just passed my PhD earlier this year, and yeah, about to grow up and have a serious job.
And so, yeah, so what's your like, why did you choose this career initially?
Wow. Initially, I think I left school when I was quite early. I left when I was 16, just I
Mhm.
wanted to get out there and do things. But I always had this sort of niggling thing in my head that um, there was sort of stigma attached with leaving school early. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to know a lot more than I knew. And I started buying popular science books because I became really interested in the universe and how it worked. And I got a brief history of time by Stephen Hawking. I think a lot of people who like physics, are drawn in by those kind of
Mhm.
popular writings. And for years, I would just read similar things by Hawking and Green until eventually, in my late 20s, I decided I really would like that identity full time of scientist. And so I went back to school. And yeah, about 12 years later now, I'm finally teaching.
Nice. Yeah. So what's your favorite part of doing what you do right now?
It's getting to use my imagination, you know. I think people have a view of science and the sciences as being quite dry and tedious. But
Uh-huh.
in actual fact, once you're allowed to kind of investigate what you want and you have a skill set that you're like, well, I know a lot about statistics now and I know this theory, and then you kind of have to use your imagination to come up with a experiment. And I like to focus on media effects experiments to see how different messages and different medias work on people's psychology. And for
Mhm.
me, it's a really creative and fun endeavor to imagine each experiment, and then, getting to see it through and getting to distribute it and then ultimately getting to read the answers. For me, that's what keeps me going. It's the fun part. And also, I also love teaching as well. I find it really a vibrant atmosphere to go to work in, full of lots of very interested young minds to keep me on my toes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really nice. So, why do you think truth is like so important and why do you think misinformation is like such a big issue like right now?
Now, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, I think I'd have probably had a bit more of a hard empirical response for you on what the truth is. But you tell me, what is the truth? When you say the truth, what do you mean?
Um, just like the opposite of like false. I guess. Like
Okay.
false information. Yeah.
Yeah. The more I look at it, the more I think it's hard to pin down on sort
Mm-hmm.
of what truth really is. And I think that's the biggest thing we have to address. We talk a lot about being in a post-truth era, but in actual fact, if we're going to keep it to like science versus anti-science,
Mm-hmm.
which would be an attempt to defame scientists or, undo the practices of the scientific method,
Uh-huh.
pseudoscience, that's existed as long as formal science has. It's not a new phenomenon. Back in the 1600s in the UK, where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
it was about the time of the bubonic plague and the Great Fire of London, and all the academics kind of went away into their hovels to just teach themselves and learn for a while and avoid the Black Death. And at that time, the Royal Society came out with the first sort of proto journal, what would
Mm-hmm.
later become, the kind of scientific journals that where you attempt to widely distribute and disseminate your ideas. And at that very same time, other members of the Royal Society actually started another group called the Athenian Society, who put out the Athenian Gazette, which is their own version of the Royal Society's credible science.
Mm-hmm.
The people from the same institution offered an alternative facts version in which they promoted pseudoscience and other ideas. And so, right from the very beginning, arguably, fake science and what we would term credible science, or science not necessarily always true, but based on the scientific method, our best hope at accuracy, they've kind of grown up together. It's like wherever there is an action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? It's built into the foundation of our scientific understanding, and it turns out socially things are quite similar as well. Someone has an idea, then you're almost guaranteed someone else is going to hold the opposite opinion for various reasons. But
Yeah.
nowadays, of course, the simple answer is accessibility to information and the democratic ability to make your own mind up about things.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, there were lots of gatekeepers to kind of tell you what to think and filter all the information that you got. But nowadays, people are more empowered to kind of go out and find out about the things they want to learn about, but also if there were things they didn't want to learn about, they are now empowered to go out and find alternative answers to sate themselves and make themselves feel a bit better about, oh my goodness, is the planet dying? Well, if I quickly go online and find out that it's not, I'll feel a bit better. You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? Whereas that wasn't the case before, really. You could get a copy of the Athenian Gazette, but you probably didn't have enough money and you probably had to get a horse and carriage to the other side of London to buy one. So it wasn't really accessible, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
now I think the older generations are struggling because they're like, how come people just used to do what we said? And now they don't. And it's, well, people have a lot of access to a lot of information and they're realizing that they're empowered to ultimately persuade themselves and find their own path forward and
Mm-hmm.
aren't as reliant on these gatekeepers anymore, like your editors or the fact there's only a few newspapers to read or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're in the early stages of a new world almost, really, right? A really digitized world, and we're still trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, like a new era. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's very interesting. So like what do you think the worst like type of misinformation is? Like about what?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, from the human aspect, it has to be medical misinformation, right? It has to be
Mm-hmm.
something that can kill you immediately, I think. Something that presents the most kind of existential threat to all of us is things
Uh-huh.
like during COVID, right? Whether we make the decision to believe that a vaccine is going to help us and, throw the curveball and see if we survive the vaccine, as most of us do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also climate change is a big one, isn't it? Because that is
Mm-hmm.
also a fantastic existential threat, but it's not as imminent. And so the kind of message strategies have to change a little bit because when we're dealing with something abstract and in the far distance, we don't tend to react to it the same as things that are near. And I always say, imagine the glow of a forest fire on the horizon. That demands some immediate action.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, switching the television on and watching it happen in Australia, well, you can sit back on the sofa a little longer, can't you? And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same sort of thing. And I think the same thing happens with climate change. It's no less deadly,
Mm.
it's just less immediate. But I
Uh-huh.
think when health misinformation gets out there and people start spreading false misinformation or disinformation in an effort to stop people taking proactive actions to defend their children or their loved ones, like not accepting the MMR vaccine because of a false report, a couple of decades ago, associating it with childhood autism, which was
Mm.
proven false kind of almost immediately and eventually retracted, and the scientist in charge fired. But by that point, the horse has bolted, and people are already believing it, and people are already making decisions on behalf of others, which can ultimately cost your life. And so I think, just in that sense, where science and health meet the internet and public opinion, there's the potential for things to go horribly wrong.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So definitely some good points. I agree. Yeah. Uh, so I think um oh yeah, what do you think is like the most will be the most effective thing to do to like prevent or I guess tackle misinformation?
Wow. If I had the answer, I would make you give me $1 million before I gave it you. That's how powerful I think the answer would be. I don't know. I mean, here's what I tell my students, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I say, if you have a problem with anything you've seen or you're not sure what to believe, and ultimately you'll make the decision to believe whatever you want, so there's no magic bullet that can help you, there's nothing that's going to change your mind. I say just take a long sit on the sofa. And what I mean is SOFA. It's my little acronym.
Uh-huh.
S, sources, credible sources, right? What does
Mm-hmm.
that mean? We'll start with yourself. Yourself, are you a credible source? We talked about sort of picking and choosing the information that makes you feel good, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I don't want to believe that the world is doomed, so maybe I'll cherry pick some information to support my point of view. All right. So you're not a credible source in that, are you really? You know
Yeah.
your motivations if you're being honest with yourself. So
Uh-huh.
be honest with yourself as a source because you're the first source of information. After that, look at where you're getting it from. New York Times, do you like it? Have they steered you wrong in the past? Who's the journalist? But also importantly, the most credible sources can, of course, spread misinformation by interviewing the wrong source. So
Mm-hmm.
have a look at everything. I
Mm-hmm.
think part of the difficulty for teenagers is, of course, it's so recent that you remember being a child, but now you're becoming adults and all of a sudden have this responsibility to yourself to
Mm-hmm.
decide what information to accept and what to reject in just a very noisy environment, and realizing that no one's going to do that for you ever again, really. It's you that has to do it for yourself. So, sourcing. And then the O in SOFA, I say ownership. I
Mm-hmm.
find a lot of Americans don't seem to know who owns their media system. And 90% of all media in the United States is owned by one of five corporations. Okay, so it's not exactly a very diverse kind of pool that you're getting information from.
Yeah.
Um, News Corp, for example, is a big corporation who own the Times of London, the Wall Street Journal. I've got them written down here, that's why I'm looking down because it's so many. Dow Jones, the books of HarperCollins and all the things on there. I
Mm-hmm.
would advise young people to actually look at the corporations that own them and look at the owners of those corporations because
Mm-hmm.
it all rolls downhill, right? If the owner of a corporation doesn't like the idea of people thinking all people in America should vote,
Mm-hmm.
including unregistered, undocumented immigrants or, green card holders or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
then down the line, his corporate subsidiaries, Fox News or whoever we're talking about, they're not going to report the other side of it because they've got their boss to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go on to F, SOFA, remember? SOF, and that's fear. Fear is a very good tactic used by journalists and the media in general to invite attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're kind of um, emotionally ignited, right?
Mm-hmm.
Scared or your adrenaline's up, you start to focus on messages around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever been in an accident or anything like that, or a minor car accident or something, but the world really does seem to slow down for you. And that's because
Mhm.
in those moments, you're just ingesting information, right?
Uh-huh.
And we are naturally attracted to information that helps us navigate threat and fear, right? Because we
Mhm.
don't want to be afraid and we don't want to get eaten by the tiger in the forest. And we're basically the same sort of humans that existed, at the end of the last ice age. Very little has changed. Socially, we've evolved, but biologically, we still have a very overly sympathetic nervous system, right? We still
Mhm.
fight and flight. We still want answers that are going to protect us, okay?
Mhm.
And so we have a natural tendency towards looking at media that stokes fear and anger or all these kind of almost repulsive sort of instincts.
Mhm.
And because the humans that write the news for us are also humans living with the same overly sympathetic nervous systems, they tend to report those aspects even more. And we find in science tends to start making news when it's associated with slightly hyperbolic things like artificial intelligence hardly ever makes news without a mention of the Terminator movies or the end
Mhm.
of the world and
Mhm.
robots dominating everything, right? And it's the
Yeah.
same for things like cloning. You don't hear about the laboratory experiments and the tiny little cells that are being cloned. You'll hear
Uh,
about Dolly the sheep, or you'll think about, oh my goodness, what if we get Stalin come back or something like that? It's
mhm.
all these sci-fi scenarios. So you want
Yeah.
to watch out for that, and watch out for when your fear is being willfully manipulated, because that leads to the last bit, which is attention. Now, this is a difficult one, but ultimately, our attention that we choose to afford these media systems or these fear appeals or these political arguments, one way or another, those
Mhm.
arguments, that's fear stoking, that selection of news is ultimately designed to, well, satisfy the owners, but the owners work for someone too.
Mhm.
That's the A. You can either say attention or advertising, right? If corporations lose the advertising, they lose the money, they lose the media, and they're gone. So
Mhm.
ultimately, the media system in a democracy like America and parts of Western Europe, etc.,
Mhm.
are aimed at monetizing attention, not
Um.
necessarily correctly informing you, but grabbing your attention and keeping your attention,
Mhm.
selling that attention to advertisers, saying, "Look how many people's attention we can get a night at 6 in the evening. Now,
Mhm.
Pepsi, would you like to operationalize that by giving us some money? We'll give you our audience if you give me the money." Okay, I'm
Uh.
not saying that that makes their information necessarily erroneous or anything like that. I just
Mhm.
think everyone should be aware, right?
Mhm.
So when you are making a decision, and it is a decision to believe something or to pursue an ideology, you can at least do so from a grounding of cognizance, right?
Yeah.
I know the source, I know who owns them, I know that they're probably going to try and make me fear something, but if
Mhm.
I know that, it'll be less scary. And I ultimately know that my attention is valuable to them, which can also give you some power as well, as we're finding out, because people can go on Twitter and they can have a go at people for saying the wrong thing on news channels, and then the advertisers pull their money and the
Uh.
owners say, right, well, that person sacked them because I've got nothing wrong. I don't care what they said. However, if the advertisers aren't giving me money, then that employee is no good to me. And so in that way, we do have power, but you have to know you have the power to use it appropriately. That's what
Uh.
I believe. So if you're confused, take a nice long sit on the sofa, SOFA, and have a good look at it. And it sounds a lot me going through it because I'm a waffler, but in actual fact, you can make these decisions within split seconds, really. You can sit down and just training your mind on it for a moment and going, okay, let's think about it consciously instead of just going with my feelings.
Uh.
That can just make you a powerful kind of democratic little entity in the media system, can't it? Someone with more power over their mind than perhaps they had yesterday, for simply through the fact that they know now. They know and they'll consider it every time, right? That's
Yeah.
what I.
Uh. Yeah, I love that. So I think that's all my questions about misinformation. So just for fun, do you have like a role model?
You know, all my role models have nothing to do with academia.
Mm,
They're all sort of like musicians and punks and things like that. But you know what? I'm going to be nice because I love her so much. I'm going to say my mum.
uh,
Whose role model isn't there, mum? Yeah, I think she showed me how to be kind and empathetic towards people,
mm,
and how not to shout people down or make people feel stupid when they don't know the things you know. You know what I mean? And I
yeah.
think that's very important. And no matter what you think or what political sort of corner you come from, if you keep empathy in mind and the fact that whoever you're arguing with, it's just another human, I
Mm,
think the world could get a little better that way because we're never going to agree, but we can
yeah.
save each other.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, that would be it. So just to close this out, do you have like any advice for people, especially teens, than to use the SOFA acronym? Do you have any advice?
I would just say if it ever becomes overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
spending too much time on the media or seeing all the hate that exists online or seeing the poor decisions other people make on the basis of their media systems, you know, like not getting vaccinated or
Uh-huh.
taking unnecessary risks, then sometimes it's worth switching it off and just walking outside,
Mm-hmm.
noticing, ah, the birds are still in the trees, the sunshine is still out, and in actual fact, in your local environment, the world probably isn't burning at any one moment, you know?
Uh-huh.
And just ground yourself a little because the real world both reflects and directs the media, but it isn't the media. And the media isn't necessarily all of the real world, you know? I think you have
Mm-hmm.
to remind yourself every now and again and take the power of perception out of the hands of corporate entities and other people. Just
Mm-hmm.
literally or metaphorically go outside and smell the grass, you know, and be human for a minute. And don't let it overwhelm you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So thank you so much again for being here. That will be it for today. Um, yeah,
It was lovely to speak to you. Thanks very much.
thank you. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.